Welcome to Suddenly Different, where we explore stories and strategies for life when it doesn't go to plan. I'm Leigh-Anne Sharland, inviting you to join me on this journey. What happens to a child who learns to disappear long before she ever learns to belong? For my guest today, Pamela Cass, becoming suddenly different didn't start in adulthood. Well, not all of it. It began at 7 years old in a small apple orchard town outside Boston, when dyslexia led to her being pulled out of class, separated from peers, and unintentionally labelled less capable. She learned to shrink at school and hoped to be found at home, the little girl who hid in cupboards, hoping someone would notice her absence, grew into a woman who would work harder than anyone in the room, climb the corporate ladder, survive a 23-year emotionally abusive marriage, battle breast cancer, rebuild her life, write a book, and ultimately discover that the disability she once feared was actually her quiet superpower. Pamela is now the co-author of The Quiet Gift, co-host of the Reignite Resilience podcast, and a speaker and coach helping adults move from invisible to influential, not by becoming louder, but by returning to who they were meant to be before life taught them to hide. Today, we explore the patterns that shape us, the courage required to break them, and the deep truth that the parts of us which once hid often become the parts that lead us home. Pamela, welcome to Suddenly Different.
Thank you so much for having me. It's an honor.
It is an absolute honor for me to have you here, because after our initial discussion, I felt so connected to you. And even though I have different challenges, I felt, even when you spoke about hiding in cupboards, I hid under beds. Like, I understand that.
Yeah.
So before we begin your story, Pamela, how are you arriving today? What is present for you in this moment?
Present in this moment is this overwhelming feeling of gratitude. I came off of a 3-day retreat last week with, probably 50 women and a few men, and all of them entrepreneurs working on themselves and skills, and all with gratitude and abundance for each other and lifting each other up. And we don't get that very often. Since COVID, it seems very disconnected, our world. We don't go to the office like we used to, and there'd be tons of people to be with. It's become very segmented, and a lot of my business is done from my computer at home, and there's no physical connection. And we know that we all carry energy. And when you're around other people that have energy, that energy transfer, it just lifts you up and makes you feel grateful. So for today, it's Monday, and I just had an amazing day at work and just had a meeting with all those people that were at the retreat last week. And it just kind of has put me in this wonderful space.
Thank you. Thank you for bringing that space to today on Suddenly Different.
Yes.
So your story begins in childhood, when you had behavioural patterns that indicated that you weren't keeping up in school. And ultimately, your mum took you to the big city to have tests, and you were diagnosed with dyslexia. Was it 7 years old?
Yes.
Yeah. So for listeners who don't know about dyslexia, what was happening to you as this little primary school little thing?
So with dyslexia, our brain is wired just a little bit differently than other people. And so sometimes words will get messed up. It has to do with how we hear things, how we learn things. And so it seemed like I was lazy and I wasn't getting work done at school. And so they would keep calling my parents, and there was this frustration. And finally, one of the teachers said, I think maybe there's something more going on. I think she should be tested just to see what's going on. And so went into the city with my mom and did the testing, and it was an all day thing. And they came back with that diagnosis. Well, this was in the 70s, and they knew about dyslexia for about 20 years by then, but there wasn't a lot known about how to help children that had dyslexia. And there's a crazy statistic that 1 in 5 people have dyslexia, and that there are probably over 70 million people that have never been diagnosed with it, who just have lived with it. They've figured out how to, I guess, maybe cheat the system, I think you could maybe call it. And ADHD, they say that 50% of people that have been diagnosed with ADHD also have dyslexia. So there could be many people that have been diagnosed with ADHD, but don't know that they also have dyslexia. And so there's so many statistics. Well, back then if we lived in Boston, I maybe would have gotten more resources, but we lived in a rural town. Like you said, it was surrounded by apple orchards, and the schools didn't have the resources, so they didn't know what to do with me. So that meant if they were doing reading or vocabulary, anything like that in class, they would take me out of the class. And at 7, that's when you're meeting your best friends. That's when you're learning how to socialize. And I was being, removed from that. And so it was very isolating. And then when I would come back to class, you would and I probably made a lot of this up, confirmation bias. Our brain creates stories. But I believe that when I came back into the class, the kids were talking about me. Like, why did she not have to do the work that we had to do? Why did she get to leave the classroom? And so then I just shrunk at school because I didn't want people to notice me. I didn't want them to see me leave the class. I didn't want them to see me come back. And so I just kind of tried to blend in and hide as much as I could at school. And then at
You
home,
didn't
it was different. Yeah.
Yeah. So you didn't get any different education. They didn't slowly try and help you learn or research how they could help you. They just gave you to someone to babysit you for the
Yeah.
period of time.
Yes. Yeah.
Wow. And I can imagine the children in the class would be thinking of going out and having fun.
Yeah. Yeah.
And why were
Absolutely.
you special?
Yeah.
That is, I understand. And we do have to forgive the past. We have to
Mm,
forgive the fact that they knew no better. Every generation that evolves within our global community, every generation knows more than the previous generation, no matter what country it is.
hmm
But yeah, I can only imagine how that made
Yeah.
little Pamela
Yeah.
feel.
Yeah. Very
And
lonely.
did the kids ever ask you what you were doing, or you made yourself invisible?
I just made myself invisible. And to be honest with you, I don't remember much more than just being pulled out of classroom. I couldn't tell you much more of my experience. I think it's probably one of those things that our brain protects us
Yes.
and allows us not to remember certain things. And I just didn't. We were there for 3 years, so until I was 10. And then we moved to Colorado. And at first, when we were moving to Colorado, there was something inside me that said, my gosh, this is my chance to go to a new school where I can make friends. Nobody knows that I was pulled out of classrooms. But when you have shrunk so long, it becomes part of who you are. And so when I showed up, and it was in December, so the worst time to start school, not at the beginning of the school year with everyone else that's new, but in the middle of the school year, I show up and everybody already has their friend groups. And here's this girl from the East Coast showing up in Colorado, and it just was the same. And I think I had one friend in elementary school, and she ended up moving away, moving her family moved to California, but that was probably the only friend, and I think I latched onto her because I think she was kind of a shy, quiet girl as well. So, yeah.
I can, yes, yeah, I can understand that. Did you do you recall, do you know whether that experience taught you to think a certain way about yourself and your place in the world?
Yes, I very much didn't think I was good enough or worthy enough to be seen.
Yeah. Yeah. And if you look at your aspirational trajectory as we're little kids, right? Sometimes we make our decision about our career when we're 7 or 8, right? As we're discovering things. Did did that affect your dreams of what you might become one day when you grew up?
Yeah, I think it did because when I would be pulled out of classrooms, I would usually go with the teacher's assistant and we would bake cookies. And when I would bake, I actually made something that was visible and I was good at. And so I remember doing a lot of cooking at home as I got older, and for the longest time, I wanted to be a chef. I was like, because I would make these amazing cakes and people would love them, and all of a sudden it would make me feel like I was worthy. Because 'cause I'm like, "I can do something good. I can't do a lot of stuff good, but man, I can do this really good." And I could play the piano. I could play the piano by ear. So I could listen to a song and I could play and I could figure out how to play the song. And so there were little things that I would could find that I could do well that made me feel good about myself. But I was so afraid of sharing it with anybody outside of just that small group, my family, that I wouldn't play the piano in front of other people. And I would cook and I would share stuff and I still to this day love to cook for people. But yeah, I think it very much kind of paved the way that I wanted to go, the direction I wanted to go.
Yeah. And you spoke to me about your memory of regularly
Mhm.
hiding in a cupboard at home, hoping, wishing that someone would come looking for you. How did that play out for you? And how did you get to a point where you stopped doing it?
So it's interesting because I'm looking back on it now, and I think why I started doing it is my younger sister, 7 years younger, so quite a bit younger. And when we lived in Massachusetts, I remember she had her little best friend, the little neighbor boy, and the two of them disappeared, and the entire neighborhood was looking for them, absolutely in a panic. And they ended up finding them. They had crawled under a bed at the little boy's house, and they both fell asleep on under the bed. It was like it was nap time. They just because they were young, they just crawled under the bed and fell asleep. Well, I was like, "Oh my gosh, everybody was looking for them." And so I was like, "Well, what if I hid? Maybe they'll come look for me." And so I went in the closet and thought that that's what would happen, and it just never did. And so when we moved to Colorado, I was older and I still remembered hiding in the closet. But then when I would hide in the closet at that age, I would take my cat with me. And so my cat would sit on my lap and he was my company. He became my best friend. I had him for 20 years and he was that person. So if people read my book, The Quiet Gift, there's a character that shows up and it's not a real person. It's just a character that shows up and you don't know who he is. For some people, it could be God, it could be a spirit guide. For me, it was my cat. That was my cat who would show up when I was sad or angry. And in the book, he gives words of wisdom. At home, it was my cat that just was always there unconditionally loving me. And so I kind of just grew out of the hiding because I couldn't really fit in the closet much anymore. I got too big. It just got uncomfortable. And I started not liking the smell of shoes that some stinky feet had been in, so it just kind of but what I traded it for was other things. It was perfectionism. It was working harder than anybody else so that I didn't have to be in special classes or get any special treatment. So when I went to high school, I could have still been in special classes and I refused. I was like, "No, I am going to work harder and do more, which meant I was, I would go to school, I would go to soccer practice, I would come home and I would stay up until I would fall asleep studying and making flashcards and making sure that that nobody knew that I was struggling and that it was hard for me because it was so easy for everybody else.
Yeah. And that's what, as humans, we need to know that the person that we see is so much more complicated and layered and nuanced, and we can't know by seeing them, seeing their face. We can't know what is inside them and what it is that they're having to do extra to be here, right? And I think, that's where compassion, completely without judgment, just, human to human, that compassion, if we can find that, and then once we have that connection, we can then understand more, because there's a safety, isn't there? Because I can imagine, until the shoes got too smelly, I can imagine like being in that cupboard with your cat and feeling all of the things that you really wanted, that nurturedness, somebody cared about you, and um and that you mattered,
Hmm. Hmm.
right? Because obviously the cat didn't try and get out, it knew. So, and that is the beautiful thing about pets, is they are straight compassion without judgment, apart from Siamese cats.
Yeah, we could all learn a lot from animals, and I think it's even harder today with social media because we all get to see people's highlight reels on their social media platforms, but you have no idea what's behind that. And there's a word that I love and I use it all the time. It's just curiosity, getting curious about other people. And I think what I have learned over these last couple of years doing the podcast, because we're about 2.5 years and we've been able to interview people all over the world, the stories that I have gotten to have shared with me have made me so much more empathetic than I ever was, because every single person has a story, every single person, and
And
just as precious as anybody else's.
they are, and the similarity, but the nuanced difference, right? And that's what I'm finding. I'm only 6 months into my journey of podcasting, but I fall in love with every guest. I feel like I have this deep connection, and I never want that to change. So, as invisibility was your early survival strategy, as you moved through university and got into your career, did you still play small, or did you find another strategy to protect yourself? Well, you did say working really hard.
Yeah. And so at home, hiding so that somebody would notice me, so that I could, prove my worth, became I need to work harder than everybody else to prove my worth and to prove that that I belong here. And so when I didn't end up going into culinary art school, because my brother was in college as well, my parents couldn't afford for me to go to a culinary art school. So I ended up going to the same school my brother did. And so I went into restaurant resort management. And so I was just going to get into the hospitality field. And so when I graduated and I got my first job, I was a manager of a restaurant that was starting up. I was 24 years old, 24, 22. I can't remember, like 22, 23. I was young. I was young starting, managing. What do I know? I've never managed anybody a day in my life. And here I get into this position. I was like, well, they're going to know that I'm an imposter, that I'm just a kid and I don't know what I'm doing. So I'm going to work harder than anybody else here. Here's one of the gifts of being dyslexic is you have pretty good emotional intelligence and you're very empathetic because you've had to work really hard and figure out things because you're very resilient. And so it made me a really good leader. And so when I would step into this role and we were opening the restaurant. So it was a brand new restaurant being opened. And I was there with, I think, 5 other managers all going through it at the same time. I was the baby. They were all had been in the restaurant industry for a long time. Some of them had owned restaurants, and so much older than I was. Within 3 months, they made me the general manager. And so now I'm the boss. And now I've got managers under me that are sometimes 3 times my age that had been and then they had this like, who is she to be in this position? And so I always felt like I was just trying to prove myself. So I'm like, well, I got to work harder to prove that I belong to be in this position. So it just became this very slippery slope of always going and working harder than anybody else to try to prove myself. The problem is other people take that as she's trying to make me look bad because she's working harder than me. And so then there was these feelings. And that my last job I was a vice president of a company, and my boss started thinking that I was trying to take his job. I was trying to make him look bad and take his job. And that had nothing to do with it. This was only me trying. This was my pattern. This was who I had become. I was that person that was like, no, I got to prove myself every day. And so I'm going to work harder than anybody else. And yeah, that's a tough space to be in,
It is exhausting and it
and-
leads to burnout,
which is what
which,
happened.
yes, yes. So we'll talk about that a little later.
Yeah.
But I, in every hero's journey story,
Mhm.
we we normally meet somebody who significantly changes our life beyond like just like the Yoda person, right?
Yeah.
And so you met a tutor
Yes.
as a teenager who gave you a moment to look at yourself quite hard. And I'd love you to tell this story about your tutor.
Yes. So I was in junior high. So I think it was in ninth grade. And my parents, I was still struggling in school. And so my parents hired a tutor. And I remember my mom dropping me off. And I was like, no, I'm fine. I'll go up by myself. You don't need to go with me. And so I went to the door, and this woman answered the door, tiny, tiny little petite woman. And she introduced herself, Miss Hips. And she motioned me in. And as I was following her, she was dragging one of her legs. And I noticed that she was holding one of her arms, because one of her arms she didn't have control over. And we sat at the kitchen table, and she started asking me some questions. And I was very much in a victim mindset. It was, oh no, I can't do that. I'm not smart enough to do that. No, I can't do that. And she stopped me and she said, I'd like to share a story with you. She goes, she contracted polio as a very young girl, and the doctors told her parents that she would never be able to walk. And she goes, I remember my mom telling me that. And then my mom said, the only person that's going to prevent you from walking is you. And so you get to choose. And so that's what she said to me. She goes, the only person that's preventing you from doing all of these things that you told me that you can't do is you. And so you get to choose. And so that has become very much the mantra, I guess, of my life. And for everyone, we get to choose. We get to choose how we react to things. We get to choose how to respond. We get to choose the direction of our life. And I've had some hard stuff thrown at me, but so have other people that have done incredible things. And so I will always be, you can be a victim or you can be a player. I choose to be a player. Everything that happens to us happens for a reason, and you just got to find the purpose in it and then do something with it.
Yeah. I just find that opportunity that you had for somebody to challenge you to, to be able to physically, like all levels, all sensory levels, all intellectual levels, she challenged you and dared you really to take control of your trajectory. And what a gift, what an absolute gift that she came into your life. Was that the first time that someone had been as brutally honest and as like really challenged your beliefs?
Yeah. Yeah, because I think everyone else she can't do that, and they wanted to coddle me or make it easier for me. And I think what I've learned over the years is that doesn't help people. It's pushing them that helps people to find their true superpower. If we don't ever push anybody, if we allow people to play it safe, because, I think about invisibility. Invisibility is safe. And a lot of us hide behind turned off cameras because that's safer, behind to-do lists, behind perfection, behind all of these things that keep us safe. And it's a choice. And I don't want to be invisible anymore. And I don't want to choose safe. I want to choose influence. I want to choose superpower. I want to choose impact. And I think if anybody listening to this gets one thing out of this is we have a choice. And so you can choose to play it safe, or you can choose to have the courage to do something incredible, because we all have it in us.
We do. And as you were saying that, like, I thought of Amy Cuddy and her power pose, and I thought of all of those things. And one of the things that also came into my thinking was like setting our goals for the future, in that we can choose and everything, but claiming it in our now, right? Like, I I am I have superpowers, right? And, you know, and maybe not making it our identity, but making it our capacity. Because I know, just like you, in every job I've ever had, and now I am had to retire early and due to health, I have worked so, so hard because I had um, a deep fear that they would find out that my year 11 education did not mean I was intelligent enough to do the job that they were entrusting in me. And, I was breaking new ground. Nobody knew what I was doing, right? So there
Yeah.
wasn't a benchmark. And I'm sure that with you, with your different ability of dyslexia, you were breaking new ground
Hmm.
all the
Hmm.
time.
Yeah. Yeah.
So with the overworking, do you feel that that overworking possibly became, other than being a mask and another way of hiding your difference, but did it at all become like an addiction, or that you had to do it?
Yeah, absolutely. So you do it so long, it literally becomes your identity. Like,
Yeah.
is who I am. And the
Yeah.
problem with that is you've got now these neural pathways that are used to that. And
Yes.
so when you try to stop, your brain doesn't know what to do. And so then you go home and you can't just sit and relax. And so you're busy doing stuff around your house. And so the beautiful thing about our brain, it is plastic and we can create new neural pathways, but it is such a conscious thing. And so now it's, doing silent retreats and unplugging from everything to allow yourself to quiet your brain. Cause the problem is we're up here all the time. We're up in
Hmm.
this monkey brain all the time. It's, talking and judging and all the things. And if we can get out of there and quiet that, which is very hard, especially with all of the technology, the constant on, we can get rid of that and quiet it and drop down into your energetic core, your Dantian, Hara, whatever you want to call it. That's where there's peace and grounding. That's where you can get that calm where okay, your nervous system can take a breath and you can relax and you can enjoy and be fully present in the moment. And that is such a beautiful space to be in.
Yeah. And isn't it glorious that you discover that at the time that's right for you, right? For those who learn it in their childhood and carry it on, full kudos to
Yes.
them. But for us who discover it eventually through having another lesson in front of us, be that a marriage, children, great teachers,
Yes.
family, and work, you know.
Yeah.
So I know that while you were working really hard, and obviously people felt that they needed to compete, so they felt their buttons pushed. You were also in a marriage for 23 years that was not functioning ideally.
Mhm.
How did the marriage affect your behavior at work and your ability to be truly who you are?
Yeah. Oh, it's such a good question because I got married pretty young, so right out of college, and I went from feeling invisible in school to being in a marriage where I felt completely invisible. I couldn't have a voice. I couldn't have friends. I really couldn't be around family. So when I worked during my marriage, I very much worked in just very menial jobs. So would do the restaurants. I worked in a daycare for like 7 years so that I could be there with my kids. So I would just play it very safe. And I just remember I went and decided to get my real estate license. It was in 2007, and which was very scary as somebody that is invisible and doesn't like to, doesn't want to put myself out there. It was very scary because in that business, like any sales, you have to go out and have relationships and talk to people and blah, blah, blah. What that did was I found out that I was good at it. And I think it is because of the dyslexia and having the empathy and the emotional intelligence. I was able to connect with people and connect in a way that people trusted me. And so I started having success. And I remember the year that I made more than my ex-husband now, but at the time, my husband, and I was overjoyed. What I didn't realize is that that was not okay because with a narcissistic person, if they lose control, that is not a good place for them. And so he lost it because I made more than him. And so the next year, I made less than him. And the next year I made less than him. And I don't remember what day it was, but I just remember looking in the mirror one morning and I was living two lives. At home, I was a shell and I just was in survival mode and I was focusing on my kids and trying to keep the home calm and peaceful as I could because I never knew what I was going to get. At work, it's where I felt like that was my home. And because I felt I had people that I was working with that trusted me and I was having success. And so that was what I was like filling my soul. And I got to this place at home where I was like, I didn't even know who I was at home. It was this shell of a person. And that's when I was like, I have to walk away from this. And it ended in a 2-year divorce battle. And it was a horrible battle. I was drinking every single night just to numb myself and I wasn't eating and I got down to like a size 0 and I was trying to keep my business going, my real estate business going. And finally, when it was all said and done, I literally remember when I finally got it's done, we're done, totally done. It was like this weight lifted off of me and something I had been doing for the last 3 months of the divorce, I was doing a gratitude practice. And so every single day I would go, I called it my gratitude walk. Then it became a gratitude run. And every single day I had to come up with 3 new things I was grateful for. And that was tough. When you're in the muck, that is so tough to think of things you're grateful for. And I would do it even if it was a blizzard outside. I'd put my snow gear on and my goggles and I would still do it. I would go every single day. It didn't matter what. And I don't remember when it happened, but I remember going on this run and I was saying my gratitudes and all of a sudden I said, I'm grateful for my husband. And we were still married at the time. And I was like, why would I say that? Why on earth would I say that? And then I was like, well, you're grateful because you have 3 incredible kids and you are who you are today because of that marriage. And I was like, okay, I'm grateful for my marriage. And so it was like this complete release of any anxiety or stress or resentment or anger towards this man. And it was all gone. And the divorce was final. And I was able to be in a space where I held no anger or anything towards him and just full gratitude. And there's something funny about gratitude because sometimes people are like, well, it's such a simple thing. Gratitude, when you are not in gratitude and when you're in high stress, like I was for 23 years, you're in high cortisol all the time.
Yeah. Yeah.
And your body takes the energy away from your immune system. And so it's not
Yeah.
taking care of your body.
Yeah.
And gratitude can actually regulate that and actually can heal your body. And so a month after my divorce was final, I was diagnosed with breast cancer. And I believe that was because for 23 years, I was in high cortisol all the
Yes.
time.
Yeah.
And so I already had my gratitude practice in place. And so when I got the diagnosis, called my best friend and she goes, "It's going to be fine." And I said, "Okay." And I just leaned into my gratitudes. And when I went through surgeries and you had to go to 2 doctors, sometimes 3 doctors' appointments a week, every doctor, "You're healing faster than anybody I've ever seen before." And I know that was the gratitudes. I know it was. And so that's been such a powerful part of my life since the end of my marriage. It was just something I got introduced to and I continue to do it today.
When it comes to gratitude, sometimes we don't know how it feels to really be grateful. Like, so for you to have experienced that spontaneous thought of your husband, right? And then you went, how can I be grateful for him? Like, it's like, hold on a minute. I really am feeling grateful. I'm not thinking grateful.
Feeling it.
I'm being grateful. And again, that transition from thinking to being isn't simple. Sounds simple, short sentence, but like it takes practice. So it is building that neural pathway and keep building it and getting that myelinated sheath over that neural pathway so that it
Mhm,
is well covered and the electricity running on that sheath is so quick that
mhm,
you are doing it, being it, feeling it before you can think yourself out of it, right? It's happened. And that, so it takes time for our listeners who may dismiss the gratitude. They've tried it, right? They wrote in a journal for 4 times, right? Like
yeah,
I tried it and it didn't work for me. It's like, well, actually give yourself a time to commit to it, right? Because it's a serious heavy duty thing to build. Just like changing patterns is, it takes time before our default pattern isn't our default pattern.
yes, yeah,
Got to build a stronger, quicker highway for that. So like that is amazing. So with your cancer and your um I I hope that is all
yeah,
going well
yes,
and and that you now listening to your body and
mhm,
making sure that your autonomic and your adrenals and your um, immune system is well loved. It does its job of washing out those
mhm,
malformed cells.
yeah,
And in sharing your story, right? Like it's
yeah,
so generous of you to be willing to share that story. And you've already written or co-authored one book, which you did the fable-like narrative, and I have downloaded it on my Kindle. I just haven't had time to read it, but like it's in my energy field. So what made you choose fable-like narrative for
well,
for
it's
those who are wanting to tell their story?
yeah, yeah, so I've my entire life, I think, I've wanted to write a book. I just felt like I had a story I wanted to share. And so my business partner and I started this podcast 2.5 years ago, and it's all on resilience and building a community for people that have gone through challenges. And I was at a conference and they had every speaker that spoke had a book. And I'm like, "Oh, I think this is a sign I probably should get to writing a book now." And they were setting up where you could meet with them and talk to the publishers about it to see if you had a story. And so I sat down with them and I just shared kind of my life story and like, oh, you have a story. You definitely have a story. Like, okay. And so I called my business partner. I said, okay, I think it's time for us to write a book. And then we talked, well, how are we going to write this book? And so we're like, well, let's write it like it's a manual for resilience. And each chapter will be on some different type of resilience. And we'll bring in some of the stories that our guests shared with us, blah, 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 blah. And so we wrote like 64 pages. And then I just hit a wall. And I think she hit a wall too, because then we stopped talking about the book. And so one of my coaching clients sent me a book in the mail, and it's called The Energy Bus. And I know the last name of the author is Gordon, I think Gordon. And it's a very small book, like my book, which for listeners, if you purchase it, it's a small book. It's a very easy read. And I typically do Audible because I'm dyslexic. It takes me a long time to read. And so I was like, well, I couldn't find it on Audible. So I'm like, all right, I'm just going to read this book. And I started reading it, and it was written like a fable, but it had a beautiful message. And so then I'm like, well, who is this author? And I look on the back, and he's got a series of books, and they're all these small, digestible books that are a story that you don't want to put down, but you've got this lesson that you learn out of it. And so I called my business partner. I said, hey, I just read this book. I think you should read it. What if we scrap the book we've written so far and we take a stab at doing a series of books and we write them like a story? And she's like, I don't know how to do that. And I'm like, well, I don't know how to do it either. But she was heading out of town on vacation. So I told her, I'm like, let me try writing my childhood story. While you're on vacation, she came by my house, grabbed the energy bus, took it with her. And in 2 months, I wrote my childhood, and I wrote it as a fable. And I knew I wanted to, I couldn't say there was a cat that was talking. So I was like, I want to come up with a character that shows up and gives wisdom. And so that's when I came up with Sam, who's just this older gentleman wearing a flannel shirt, and he has peppermints in his pocket that he always gives Emily, the main character. And then I wanted there to be some sort of a writing, because journaling has been a part of my life forever. I've always journaled. And so I wanted there to be a journal in it. And so Sam gifts Emily the journal at the very beginning of the book, and the journal disappears, but then it will show up when she's at a pivotal moment and needs something. And so Sam will show up, and then the journal will show up, and it always has a question for her to answer. And it's always a question about her worth. And so it's kind of her journey. And so I wanted it to be something that was easy for people to read, and that even a teenager could read it. And for any of those kids out there that are feeling invisible right now, so that they know that they're not alone. There's many of us that have hidden under beds or in closets or wherever else we've hidden because we wanted to be seen.
Wow. That is beautiful, and I'm going to definitely read that very soon. What has been the reaction of your readers? What kind of feedback have you had from them about the book?
Yeah, it's been, for somebody who has always struggled with self-worth and always kind of been this invisible girl, to write a book about your childhood story and publish it was one of the scariest and most vulnerable things that you could ever do, because you don't know. I to this day, there are people that, oh, I bought your book, and then I don't hear from them, and my monkey mind is like, oh my gosh, they didn't like it, they don't like me anymore, I'm never going to hear from them, and I get panicked. But the responses I've gotten have been such a mix of things. People that are like, I felt myself in that story. I used to hide because I had terrible acne and I didn't want people to see me. And so beautiful stories like that from people that can relate to Emily's story. And then people that are like, oh my gosh, every counselor at every school should have this book. Every parent should have this book to understand their children. And so it's been a beautiful validation that the story that I had to share was one that needed to be shared.
I love that. Yeah, that is beautiful. That is beautiful. Going back to our superpowers.
Yes.
So you've reframed dyslexia from a limitation to a gift. What unique strengths? I know that you've mentioned a couple of them about your empathy and your ability to connect with people and to go that extra yard. But What are the unique strengths that dyslexia has given you?
Oh my gosh, creativity. So I can, I'll be in meetings and people will say stuff and I'm like, "Oh, we should do this." So we have this ability to really think outside the box because we've always had to find outside the box ways of doing things. And so we are super creative. Where we get paralyzed if someone wants to give me a stack of papers and say, read through all of this or anything like that that's going to be overwhelming, that will paralyze somebody with dyslexia. But man, if you can tap into that creativity, that ability to find solutions that other people don't see because they can think outside the box, those are really the unique gifts of somebody with dyslexia. And I've always known I've been different in that way. And it's funny that I'll share this story because this is kind of interesting how powerful our brain is. I was newly in a leadership position, and this was outside the when I was divorced. They wanted me to speak at a meeting, and there was 100 people that were going to be there. And I was like, okay, I'm going to speak about our brain and how clever our brain is and what we can do with it. And it was how we can change our beliefs. And so I'm writing it and I'm like, oh, you know what? I should share about my dyslexia. Well, no one knew I had dyslexia and I was in a leadership position. So I was taking a risk in doing this anyway. And that morning I was like, well, shoot, I actually don't think I have dyslexia anymore. I think I cured myself. So I believed that I cured myself. And so this was before Chat GPT. And so I went to Google and I said, can you cure yourself of dyslexia? And it said, no. And I was like, well, shoot, I guess I still have dyslexia. But because I did not want to be different, I really rewired my brain to believe that I did not have a disability. And so in my mind, I wasn't dyslexic. This is just who I was. And so I thought that was such an interesting thing. And so I shared with the entire company, all, 100 agents in the office, people online, the leadership team, my boss, that I have dyslexia. And what was so beautiful about that is the authenticity of that, the connection that that created with the people in the room who had no idea, but it made me human because in their mind, oh, but you're so stoic and perfect and like nothing bothers you and blah blah. And that I was like, that is all just what I've created. That's the image I have created because I didn't want anyone to know that I had a disability, which I don't think is a disability. I think it's a gift. And so yeah, so it was kind of a
Yeah.
funny story.
Well, I think Google's wrong, and I think seeing it as a gift and
Yeah.
seeing it as a superpower is so important. And when we look at neurodivergent team members, so one of the things that in my last 4 years of being ill, one of the tests that I have had is going to a neuroscientist
Hmm.
and doing a variety of different tests. And during that time, I discovered that I have ADHD now. And when I now look back on my career and my childhood and especially my primary school, makes sense. But I wasn't a naughty ADHD. I was an intelligent,
Yeah.
quick worker, right? So I did the work. I didn't avoid the work. I just did it quickly. So I was accepted as being extraordinary with my abilities, but really I was neurodivergent. And I know that in current workplace cultures, neurodivergence is being looked at more broadly, more
Hmm.
openly,
Hmm.
and more support is being provided in some workplaces. But how can workplaces make it safe for people to share their divergent, to make it safe for them to be able to speak about their superpower and use it when there are people who will feel challenged, will have bias, and will also be feeling like imposters.
Yeah. Know that you mentioned that, there are companies now that are more accepting of it. I don't think it's enough. So I think it's probably a very small percentage of companies, and it's just because people don't know enough about it. And so I think it falls on the leaders of these organizations to be the ones, because so when I took over the role in a leadership position, I walked into the position and they had no training. I had never run a real estate brokerage before. I didn't know what the heck I was doing. And so I did what any, dyslexic person does. I tried to connect with people. And so I just started talking with my staff, with the agents, getting to know them. When you take the time to connect with somebody, that's how you can find out what they do really well and the things that they struggle with. And guess what? They don't even have to tell me if, oh, I got ADHD, I have dyslexia. They don't even have to tell me. Now I know what their superpower is because I've got this connection with them and I can observe what it is that they do really well. And I can help them lean into that. And then and I know I'm making it sound like it's really easy. It's not easy because taking the time to connect with people, leaders don't think that's a good ROI, return on their investment. They think that they need to be, crunching, pushing sales and it's all about the bottom line. But if you can't connect with the people that work for you, then you're not tapping into their full potential, which is actually costing you money. And if people don't feel connected and supported in positions, they're not going to stay long, or they're not going to have any loyalty. They're going to do the base and then they're going to be gone. But if you can have that connection with the people that are working with you and around you, and you can tap into what it is that they're uniquely good at, and it's safe for them, then you're going to unleash something that's incredibly powerful. And I was able to do that in my office because I was able to observe, what people did really well. And I could make sure that they tapped into that. And that's how I moved up so quickly in the company, because I was able to double the sales in that office. And then we did it with another office. And then they were, what are you doing? And I'm like, well, I'm just connecting and talking with people and helping them be the best version of themselves. And that's what it came down to. So there's a lot of work that needs to be done, and it's got to be at the leadership level.
Yeah. Yeah. It's got to be a safe place for people
Absolutely.
to be able to step out of their comfort zone and show their soft underbelly, right? That, that bit that is a little bit more sensitive than other places. So if you were able to give advice to somebody who was not in leadership, right? Who was trying to be invisible, trying to keep their job in that real survival mode, even trying to stay small so that their husband didn't feel, or their partner didn't feel competed with or um, overtaken. What steps do you think that someone could take, just their first step, and what they could do to come out of that darkness
Yeah.
and be truly themselves?
So I think some of the first steps are finding finding somebody that can understand, whether it's a counselor, somebody in your community, somebody that is safe, that you can share what you're going through, because trying to do it on your own is very daunting. And oftentimes you're not going to succeed if you're trying to just do it on your own. I think that's probably the biggest. I had a great group of friends that were surrounding me and that helped me once I kind of got out of my marriage. The other for me is getting out of our head as much as we can and getting grounded in our energetic center. We've got our energetic center, and the more we're up here in our head, you're always going to have doubt and fear, and you're going to want to play it safe. If you can drop into your core and really feel grounded there, that's the safe space to be. And that will give you the courage to walk away from a six-figure job having no idea what the hell you're going to do and start all over, which is what I did. So it's things like that. And I'll share a story. I was on a podcast a couple of months ago. And when I got on the podcast, and he was on the other side of the world, and we got on, and it was an interview, just like what we did, interview to see if we connect and if he wants me on his podcast. And at the end, he's like, I'd love to have you on my podcast. Let me tell you how it works. We're going to get on Riverside, which is the platform. And he goes, but we don't have the camera on. And so I got curious. I was like, well, tell me more about not having the camera on. He goes, well, I don't want people to see me because then I'll stress out and maybe I'll forget a question and then they'll know that I'm fumbling. And so all of this doubt and fear. And I told him, I was like, could I walk you through something that I do with people and it takes them out of your head and into your energetic core? Could I walk you through that? It might just help you. And so we walked through it. So this 30-minute interview was an hour interview because I stayed and we did this thing. Well, our interview was set for 3 weeks from that date, 6:00 in the morning. I got up. It's early here. And I was like, well, I'm going to go to the gym after it. He's not going to have the camera on, so I don't need to do my hair. I'm not going to put makeup on. I'm just going to wear my workout clothes. It'll be perfectly fine. And so I show up and I had my camera off and he comes on and he has his camera on and he has this smile on his face. And he's like, been so excited to see you and for this interview. He goes, I want to let you know that I've been working on what you showed me. And he goes, the last 2 podcast interviews I did, I kept my camera on. And so if it's okay with you, I'd like to have my camera on today. And I was like, well, crap. I was like, and of course, what did I say? I said, of course, absolutely. And so now it's out in the world, my, not perfect hair, no makeup, but there's such power in grounding yourself. And so
Yes.
in my keynotes, I walk people through that process so that they can come back to their home and get out of their head, because that's such a safe place. And when you're speaking and you're in conversations and you're leading from that space, you can connect with people at a different level and the sky's the limit. You feel like you can do anything.
Yes. Yes. Wow. What a way to end a podcast, really. I feel the energy that you shared with him. Thank you for sharing it with me and with the audience. I just like everyone at home to think about how they're feeling right now. I'm tingling. I'm so happy for that person, that podcaster, for the breakthrough that he's had, and for all the people who've listened to his podcast and who will be sharing his journey. It's so exciting. So Pamela's story is a reminder that invisibility isn't a personality trait. It's a survival strategy. A strategy learned in childhood, perfected in adulthood, and eventually questioned when the cost becomes too high. Her journey from hiding to healing is a testament to what becomes possible when a woman stops abandoning herself and begins to honor her worth, her story, and her quiet gifts. If something in Pamela's story touched the part of you that feels unseen, I want you to hear this. You were never meant to disappear. You were always meant to emerge. You are amazing. You have a unique superpower in you, just like Pamela does, just like I do. We are all meant to be extraordinary, which is why we're all so different. So thank you, Pamela, for your courage, your honesty, and your willingness to turn your quiet gifts into a guiding light for others.
Thank you.
Thank you. This has been Suddenly Different. I'm Leigh-Anne Sharland, and I'm so grateful you shared your time with me. If you felt a spark, a tear, or a moment of recognition, I hope you'll pass that gift along by sharing this show. Take a deep breath, trust your path, and I'll meet you back here soon.